Well, hello there, and top of the evening. Happy Tuesday, everybody. This is the place that you are supposed to be. It is Fertility with Fink and Friends. I am Fink, and you are friends, and I am so happy to see you all here this Tuesday, as we are every Tuesday evening at 5 p.m. Central, which means 4 o'clock. Um, Going that way and 6 o'clock going that way, 3 o'clock on the West Coast. How about that? I am live this evening from Pensacola, Florida, where I am a fertility gynecologist at New Life Fertility. We have offices here in Pensacola and in Mobile, Alabama, and in Panama City. I also do some work with my dear colleagues at the Missouri Center for Reproductive Medicine in St. Louis and also in Tulsa. So whether you are joining from one of our local areas, either close by or perhaps far away as the other coasts or across some of the oceans, as we have some folks who join us here from the Caribbean all the time, it is such a pleasure to see you on this Tuesday evening, and I hope your week is thus far going absolutely beautifully. Last week was spring break for many people. If you traveled, I hope your travel was uneventful. I hope you didn't have to wait in lines that were too long. Travel has really started to become quite a. It used to be that when you would travel, the travel was really part of the adventure. That your vacation or whatever started when you left home. And now, what with airline travel, it has become like a gauntlet that you have to survive on both the front and the back ends of your vacation. So, gosh, that does get old and tiresome, but at least we have the freedom to be able to go out and explore and experience this world of ours. So, and I hope you got to do a little bit of that this season. Hello to all my friends who are joining. Fertility nurse G. Bemmy. Hello. What a pleasure to have you. Hello, Aaron. Thank you for being here. And Finkity, who says, you're such a cool, smart, and charismatic guy. And I would expect you to say nothing less, because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, to my daughter there, who made that very lovely, that very lovely greeting. Hi, KN Davidson, Noodles for Life, A. Clark, Simona. Hello, good evening, and welcome to you. Let's see, we've got Sarah over here and Sheila. We've got a bunch of folks already on the Facebook and the LinkedIn and the YouTube side. So that's coming from right here in the middle. And over here on this side, we have my Instagram, and that's Randy Fink MD. And here is New Life Fertility's Instagram right here. Please throw your questions this way, and we will have the opportunity to talk about all those things that are important tonight, all those things about making a family, about being a family, things about women's health, all the most important parts. That's what we're here to talk about. So at New Life Fertility here in Pensacola, this week is egg retrieval week. So we are busy doing egg retrievals, and that is always a busy time for us around here. And when I go to visit my colleagues in St. Louis, that's what I help with there, and typically do embryo transfers in Tulsa. I also have the ability to answer some questions here by email if you'd like to throw them in. But the email questions we won't really be able to get to until next show. So feel free to ask them through whatever app you are watching us on right now. But one of the email questions from last time, by the way, the email for that is askfertilitywithfink@firstfertility.com. Ask Fertility with Fink at firstfertility.com. A question that I got last time was why, I have a couple of them here. Why do some practices do batching for their IVF cycles? And the answer to that really has to do with the volume of cycles that we do. And so, in some places where the practices are very, very high volume, such as where I used to work, it was more efficient to be able to offer that IVF service really every day of the week, typically except for Sunday. So we would do egg retrievals really every single day, so people we're still often batched. We're still sort of had to do with a maximum number of stimulation starts on any given day, so that we had not an unreasonable amount of egg retrievals on any given day. But it ultimately pertains to, how efficient is it for the laboratory? Because we have embryologists who work in the laboratory, and their workload needs to be, we need to be careful with that, because embryos are very, very fragile. And so we want our embryologists to be able to do their very best without having to become too fatigued looking through the microscope and dealing with those very, very tiny little humans. And having anesthesia and having monitoring, being able to do those on predictable days is something that is valued in practices that do batching. But in places where the volume is so high that they are able to just process people through constantly, then there's no reason to have to do that batching. Now, there are pluses and minuses to each. In general, there is no wrong answer to that. Batching is not harmful to people. Trying to put you on a calendar or on a schedule does not hurt your chances of pregnancy. It does not harm your eggs or your embryos. It really mostly has to do purely with logistics, or kind of just with the schedule. So hopefully that answered that question there. And another question I had was, what is the difference between HCG, LH, and Menopur? So that's a great question, because these are both medications that are used in IVF cycles, or in, I should say, in ovarian stimulation cycles, because there are times that we can use those medications just for ovulation induction, but they get expensive. And so there are oral medications that we use for things like IUI, ovulation induction. It is just typically a little bit cheaper to use the oral medications. Plus, when we use the injectables, you run the risk of really revving up the ovaries to the point where you make more eggs than you can deal with. So let's say that we're doing an IUI cycle, or an intrauterine insemination. We want your ovary to be able to produce, anywhere from 1 to potentially 3 follicles or 3 eggs, because it gives, depending on your age, because it gives the sperm a little bit more of a target to hit without meaningfully increasing the risk of multiples, because we don't want you to have multiples. We don't want you to have twins. We certainly don't want you to have triplets. One healthy baby at a time is really what we're looking for. So, if we were to give you that injectable medication and your ovary responded kind of the way that we would predict, when you get to the same kind of dose for IVF, then you might make 8, 9, or 10 eggs, and we certainly don't want you releasing 10 eggs if we're putting 50 million sperm on the inside, because that is how you end up with a reality TV show. And trust me, you don't want to be on that TV show. And frankly, neither do I, nor does your doctor. So that's one consideration there. But the difference between HCG, LH, and Menopur is that, again, both are medications that are used in the stimulation process. So HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropin, is the hormone that your body makes when you're pregnant, right? So when we do a pregnancy test, we're testing that HCG hormone. HCG functions in the body as a hormone that's called LH, or luteinizing hormone. FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone, this comes in the form of a medication known as Follistim or Gonal F. Those are the two forms of FSH. And if FSH is just FSH, Menopur is a medication, another injectable medication that is a combination of both FSH and some HCG, or the LH hormone. So there are some practices that will use HCG alone instead of using Menopur because it's cheaper. And it is. It's substantially cheaper than using Menopur. But the theoretical benefit of Menopur, which has a combination of both the FSH and the LH hormone, is that it's got enough different sort of little subtypes of FSH in it that it may help to stimulate your brain or your pituitary gland in terms of maybe a little bit more efficient of a way to make eggs. Now, there's not great evidence out there that's published that shows that the outcomes will be better when using Menopur. But for most of us in the industry, we have seen that to be the case. We kind of know that to be the case. And I admit that's controversial. There are many folks who say, nope, I don't think that's true at all, in which case, that's absolutely fine. It's really up to doctor and patient to decide what is the best course of action. But you asked the question, what's the difference between HCG, LH, and Menopur? And that's that the Menopur medication has both FSH and LH, whereas HCG, LH functions purely as the LH hormone. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit. Clear as mud, I hope, here. And let's see. Hi, Angela. Nice to see you here this evening. Thank you for being a part of my week. Hi, E. Winnick. Reed 67, good to see you there. El Manganata, I think that says. Shadia, hello, good evening to you. Noodles for Life says, started no Mincy's medicated FET post orolysis suppression, but my baseline showed a 25 millimeter follicle. My E2 was 35, so the doctor was not concerned. Will the cyst cause issues with the FET? And the answer to that is probably not. You're doing a medicated cycle FET, which means that we are giving you all that hormone. We're giving you all the estrogen you need. We're giving you all of the progesterone that you will need. Now, if that cyst that you had that was 2.5 centimeters, 25 millimeters, my first thought is, oh, well, maybe you're cycling and that's, an ovulatory follicle that you're just getting ready to release. Certainly, if that were the case, then yeah, that would mess with things. However, you told me there that your estradiol level was 35, which is an estrogen level that is consistent with being at the beginning of your menstrual cycle, which means that cyst is not producing hormones, which means it's not an ovulatory cyst. So in your situation there, I would say, nope, Noodles, I think you're okay with that cyst. I agree. You can leave it there and it shouldn't give you another bit of trouble. Now, one thing I will tell you is that when you do ultrasounds, you are still going to see some evidence of that cyst hanging out there. It's going to be there. So don't be alarmed about that. Sometimes we'll see these cystic structures in the ovaries at the beginning of a cycle, and people will, and they don't just disappear on their own automatically. And so people will worry about that and think, oh my gosh, this is going to cause me some kind of problem. They come back and they do another ultrasound. They say, oh no, my cyst is still there. That must mean something is wrong. Ovaries form cysts. That's what they do. That's really their job, because those cysts are really little egg houses. So what you're worried about there has to do is that egg house going to hormonally mess with anything? And I think in your situation, the answer is no, because you got it there and you're at an early cycle estrogen number. So good deal. I like it. A. Clark says, my doctor made a comment that my embryo implanted low. Is there anything to be concerned about or look out for? Well, that's an interesting observation. So first of all, You got an implantation, so congratulations. That is absolutely fantastic. So it sounds like you did an embryo transfer and you got a positive pregnancy test, and now you're at the point that you could do an ultrasound and see that pregnancy in your uterus. And my friend, that is cause for celebration. Next cause for celebration will be when you can look and you see that that heartbeat. Because once you look and you see that heartbeat, we know that roughly about 95% of those pregnancies will continue on. But that is wonderful, wonderful news. So does it mean anything that it implanted low? No, you really can't say anything about that this early in a pregnancy. Now, as the uterus grows, the embryo will or the pregnancy will move along with it. So, and most of the time, if it looks like it's something that's low, it kind of fully moves along. Sometimes we will see, and we've talked about this on the program before, by the time folks have their anatomy ultrasound, which is usually between about 16 and 20 weeks pregnant, you may have something that's called a low-lying placenta. And that's where the placenta is nearby to the opening of the cervix. Most of those things will continue to move out of the way and really don't cause you to have any problem as the pregnancy continues to grow and the uterus gets larger. The one caveat to that is something that's called a placenta previa. And a placenta previa is where that placenta sits right over the opening of the cervix. And that can be a problem because that can cause you to have bleeding. You can't deliver vaginally if the placenta is right over the cervix. And that's something that we have to watch for very carefully. But the fact that you're still dealing with an embryo that is at its, at and around its implantation time, nothing to worry about there. Now, I will say there's one caveat on that as well, and that is, well, we want to make sure that pregnancy is actually inside the uterus and that it's not in the cervix, because the cervix itself is not a place that a pregnancy will continue to grow. So, doesn't sound like that's the issue there, A. Clark, and congratulations on your great achievement. We are all really happy for you. Reed, we are excited. Reed is excited for a consultation on Friday, and so am I. Glad to hear that. Excellent. Howdy, Audrey. Amanda Morrison, hello, good evening. And Marlena, the wonderful Amber Vince is here from Kentucky. Haven't seen you around these parts for a while, but I do understand you're coming to these parts for a while because, by the way, just in case you weren't aware, Pensacola Beach was named the number one, that's right, the number one beach in the United States of America. The number two beach in the United States of America is actually Navarre Beach, which is one beach east of Pensacola Beach. So if you're thinking about a beach holiday, especially if you want to come on a beach holiday and get pregnant by that nice IVF doctor while you're there, Pensacola is the place to be. So I'll tell you that. Just my little plug there. Nice to see you, Amber. And also the wonderful and talented Angela Fox. Thank you, Practitioner Fox, for being here from the great state of the one that starts with the M. Now, is that Michigan? Is it Montana? Missouri? Wisconsin. No, that doesn't start with an M. Oh, Minnesota. That's the one. Yeah, sorry. I just always get that confused, but I'm very happy to have you here this evening. Let's see. We've got Florida. Florida Mama Lynn's is here over on the New Life side, and Diani 21. Howdy. Over on the Facebook side, we got a couple of questions here coming in. Thank you, folks, for joining us here tonight. Looks like Marquis Smith said, excited about IVF. Hopefully everything goes great. The wife was on weight loss meds, met her goal, and I am on Clomid. Taking the semen analysis again, praying for good results, and then the shots. Yeah, indeed. So I wish there was a way, actually, that we could do. Thank you, by the way, Marky, for joining in there, for being here with us tonight. I wish there was a way that we could get through life without having to do shots. When my kids were little, and we had to take them to the doctor. Now, don't think this is absolutely not a political statement, and I'm not trying to say anything about I am pro-vaccine. Um, but I am anti-shot because when the kids have to get all those vaccines, hearing them cry and scream and run away and hide under the desk and everything else is very traumatic for a parent. I think it's traumatic for a child. We all have those memories of going to the doctor in childhood. So is it any wonder that people have some innate discomfort when being at the doctor's office as an adult, especially when there's shots involved? And maybe any of you guys are feel free to weigh in here, but I see a lot of people with tattoos. Tattoos are a very common part of our lives now, and I am told that it's a big difference. You can have a whole sleeve of tattoo or have tattoos all over your body, but giving blood, taking a blood test is a completely different thing. That needle is apparently totally different. And somebody just told me last week, yeah, when I get a tattoo, I relax, I fall asleep. When I get a blood test, I am just freaked out. It's a wonder to see people pass out getting a blood test who can be, literally covered in tattoos. I don't, personally, I don't understand it, but I just wish that we could get through life without needles, Peyton McFillin, hello, good evening to you. And let's see here. Amanda says, you helped me get my beautiful baby, almost 3-year-old daughter. Has it been that long, Amanda? My gosh. Thank you. I've transferred again, but no success. I have 10 day 3 embryos left. Should I try and push it to blast or just keep transferring? Well, that is that's a very good question. So, there's a couple of different ways to think about that. In many practices, we don't use the day 3 embryos. We prefer to grow them out to blast because when they're blastocysts, we know that they have a much higher probability of being able to give you a baby. And so therefore we grow to blast. With a day 3 embryo that doesn't work, if it doesn't stick, we don't really know what the issue was because we can't really say much about the embryo. Would it have been an embryo that continued to grow if you left it? And different ways to look at it. Some people think, gosh, embryos always do better when they're in their mother. Okay, instead of in the laboratory. And I think I get that, but some embryos that are day 3 are not going to continue to grow at all. And if you spend your time and if you spend your money, and more importantly, if you spend your emotional capital on doing embryo transfers that don't work, that's how you end up with an empty wallet and a broken heart. So my feeling is, if you've got those day 3 embryos, you can transfer multiple day 3 embryos. And I imagine that's what you're doing there, Amanda. You could, depending on age, you can transfer, at least 2 or 3 at a time, because the odds that multiple embryos will be normal and will stick is always is something that we assume is probably not the case in most scenarios. So you could do it that way, or you've got 10 embryos. If you want to thaw them and grow them to blast, it's going to let nature help you to select which embryos have a higher probability of being able to get you a baby. And to me, that feels like the right choice. I generally would not have recommended, even when we did day 3 embryos, I would not have recommended someone freeze 10 day 3 embryos, except for very specific circumstances, because that's just a lot of day 3 embryos without the ability to be able to predict which ones have a higher probability of getting you that baby. So I think you can transfer multiple embryos, day 3s, and play the odds there, or for fewer embryo transfers, grow them out to blast, and then start transferring blasts. Marlena says, I am watching you from the beach. Oh, excellent. My Receptiva returned as a 4. I up my vitamin C to 1,000. So yes, that is an important thing. So Marlena had a receptiva test, which is the non-invasive test for endometriosis. And when we find endometriosis, or specifically the receptiva test looks for a marker that's known as BCL6. BCL6 in the uterine lining means that your body will fight against your own progesterone. And remember, it's that progesterone that maintains the pregnancy. A receptiva 4 is a positive test. One of the things that we recommend in that scenario is that you do start to get a little bit more vitamin C, and that is 1,000. So Marlena, you are paying attention. Love that. God, I am very impressed. And let's see. And then, when that receptiva is positive, that means that we're going to give you some suppression. We're going to give you some hormonal suppression to turn off that BCL6, to turn off that endometriosis before we go to place an embryo inside. Hello, Logan, the therapist. Good evening. And David, how are you tonight? Hi, Sarah and Audrey Kristen. Peyton says, we are so thankful, sending all the good vibes and prayers your way, Marquis. That's a very nice thing, Peyton. Thank you for being a part of that. And let's see here. Peyton said, oh, well, we're so grateful. Our little girl will be here in September. Oh, man, that is so exciting. Gosh, I can't believe it's been that long. It seems like only yesterday. Thank you for helping to make our IVF experience so positive. Peyton, that is a very kind thing to say, and I truly appreciate that. I do think that in many places, we do this IVF business really all day long. And it's not, we talk a lot about IVF because there is a lot to learn. And it's not that that's the only path to pregnancy for everyone, but we do talk a lot about it. And since we are doing it so often, all of these things that we deal with are very normal for us. And, the important thing to realize for us as healthcare providers is that it's not normal for you. You're going through IVF, and frankly, even if you've been through 4 or 5 cycles of IVF, you become familiar with the process. You're familiar with the terminology. You're familiar with the way kind of everything goes, but that still doesn't mean it's natural for you. It's still a very hard process. And so, Peyton, I think one of the things that we really I try to bring to a focus here is that everyone deserves to feel special. Everyone deserves to be treated individually, uniquely. And when you are with us, you are the most important things in our world at that moment. And I think really feel like people should know that. And I know there are other places people can go for IVF. You can go to some very, very expensive places that are, $40,000 and $50,000 for a cycle. And they have big names. And you say, oh, that must be better because it's so expensive, right? They have a name. Oh, I recognize that name. But at the end of the day, if they're such high volume that you are feeling like you're part of the IVF conveyor belt, then I would say that, at least for me, that wouldn't be the place that I would want to be. I personally want that individual care. When I go to the doctor, I want to feel like I'm special. I want to feel like I'm the most important one who's there at that moment. So that's really what we strive for. And thank you for saying that, Peyton. I really do appreciate it. Hey, folks, it's 5:30, bottom of the hour. So you know what time that means. It is time for the 5:30 Fuzzies with Fink. And if you are not in my time zone, if you're on the East Coast or on Mountain Time or on the West Coast, it's not 5:30, but it's still 30 minutes after. So just go with it, would you? The Fuzzies with Fink is about the time that we can all stand together as one community and send out the really positive vibes to all those people out there tonight who need that help from us. The fertility journey can be very lonely. The fertility journey can feel very frightening and very isolating because you never really know for sure what's going to happen at the end of that path. I always tell people it's the crappiest roller coaster in the park to ride on because it jerks you around, it spins you upside down, it empties your pockets, it brings around all this uncertainty because the train's going to pull back in the station, and you can't tell for sure if you're going to be getting off of it with a baby in your arms. It's scary, and it's not just fertility. There's so much going on in the world out there, and we all have our problems. We have issues with family. We have issues with our friends and our loved ones. We have issues in our relationships. We have issues at work. These stresses in our world can really start to make us feel down, to make us feel like the world is out to get us and nothing good is ever going to come. That's a very lonely feeling. I know that most of the folks who watch this broadcast are the kind of people who would do anything. Look at the interaction here between Marquis and Peyton for all that kindness being exchanged between strangers on Facebook. You're very special people, as are everybody out there tonight who's watching. So, since you would give the shirt off your back, we don't need your shirt. We just need some positive vibes to send out there to everyone who is in need tonight, to everyone who could use a pat on the back, a hand on the shoulder, a little bit of a hug, even just a smile, to know that you're not alone. What you're going through is not something that is never ending. There is hope. There is always hope, and tomorrow is a new day. That's the Fuzzies with Fink. Let's send out all the positive vibes. Let's break the internet with kindness as we stand together as one community to tell everybody tonight who needs it, you're not alone. So thank you for participating in that. I hope it's as meaningful to you as it is to me, because I'm very serious about what I say. Hey, you know what? Ask your friends if they can to join next week, even if it's just 1 minute before 29 minutes past the hour, so that we can have as much power behind that fuzzy 30-minute thing. Send out all those positive vibes. Thank you for all the hearts over here. And I really do appreciate that. So let's see who else we got going on here. Oh gosh, we got several here. Alexa is here. We got Anna Marie. Hi, how are you? Logan, the therapist, says, so happy to see you doing these. I've shared with all my IVF clients. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. Hoping to add the resources for them. Thank you, Logan. That's very kind. Carla, howdy. Logan says, totally biased, forever grateful to MCRM. We have our final baby who's now 2, thanks to MCRM. It's a great group of people up there, and really happy to be a part, and even happier to know that you've got that 2-year-old at home. And what a wonderful, wonderful thing. I think 3 is way worse than 2. People talk about the terrible 2s. I think 3 was a lot harder, but 3 is also, it's still fun, because they start to sound like, start talking, and they've got that personality, but 4, I think, is really my favorite age. I think 4 is the best because they sound like, little people, but they're still, got the little baby voices, and oh boy, makes me miss those days. Mine, by the way, are 13, 17, and 19. So, but in my mind, I 100% can still, feel rocking them to sleep, and singing them songs, and doing all those fun things that we do, changing diapers and everything else, just honestly like it was yesterday. So when they tell you, boy, it goes by fast, man, I can't be honest enough with you how true that really is. Rachel, good evening. Rachel asks, how much does IVF cost without insurance? And I have to give you a vague and general answer to that, Rachel, because costs for IVF differ depending on where you are. and depending on what you want to do. So there are places that offer IVF in the neighborhood of $4,000 to $6,000, including medications. In those centers, the care is often generalized, kind of one size fits most. The kind of contact and communication that you get may suffer some. So you have to be very self-directed. You have to be able to advocate for yourself in that system. But it is right for some people, and at that cost. That's a good thing. Where I am, it's on the order of about $10,000 or so for a cycle of IVF. Medications cost money. There are ways that you can save money on medications. There are costs of doing genetic testing, which we call PGT. Depends on whether you want to do that testing. It depends on whether you do fresh embryo transfers or frozen embryo transfers. Some practices charge up to about 18 or so thousand, which I think is probably roughly an average, and that can include many of the sperm preparation techniques that we use and things like the PGT testing. And then there are still some much more expensive practices that charge, as I just mentioned, in the neighborhood of even $30,000 to $40,000 for a cycle of IVF. And I have to say, I'm certainly not trying to, I don't speak ill of anyone else's practice or anything anyone does, but for me, that's hard to justify because I think there is a point at which you can effectively provide nuanced, boutique-like, customized care for people where people can feel like they are important, and you can do that, provide that care individually without having to break the bank. I think it probably costs a little bit more. When you're very low cost, you're going to appeal to an extremely high volume, and that's the only way that those practices can survive as a business. They have to do those very high volumes. But when you get into high volumes, there's a cost to you as a patient for that. You lose some of that personal touch. I think there's a happy medium in there where cost can be balanced by service. But just because you go to much higher costs does not mean that you get much higher services. I think that there is a happy medium in there between the probably $10,000 and $20,000 range that gets you, very best practices with very caring providers, with people who will pay a lot of attention to you. So I think that's probably realistically what most people can expect to pay. Let's see. Looks like Carrie is here. Hi, Midgie. Good to see you there as well. Midgie says, hi, everyone. Reed says, this literally had me in tears. I never heard. Oh, thank you. I guess you're talking about the fuzzies there. I've never heard a provider speak about it this way. 2 clinics and 4 rounds. This is why we chose you, Dr. Fink. Reed, you have you are going to make me tear up here, but I feel very strongly about that. And really, the one thing I hope I can impress upon everyone out there is that the world is not. I don't know. The world may not be a happy place. Should it be a happy place? Honestly, we're not really around here for all that long, so we should try to make the best of it if we can. You can't always. It's okay to feel down, but what it's not okay to feel is alone. Because there are so many resources here, and sometimes it's nice just to be next to somebody who will listen and put their arm around you and give you a hug and say, I know this process sucks. But hopefully there are happy ends, there are happy endings, and and really a light at the end of the tunnel. But thank you, Reed, for saying that kindness there. Zinni in Miami, thank you for being here. Hello and good evening. How are you? Did you hear it that time? I hope you heard it that time. I got to tell you, the part of the problem here is that the things pop up on my feeds here while I'm talking, but sometimes I'm talking and you may have said something to me and it was 20 minutes ago, and then by the time I get to it and give you a greeting and say hello, you may have already dropped off the broadcast here. So, Zinni, I hope you're there. Thank you very much for being here every single week. You brighten up, you brighten the place up. I appreciate that. Sarah says, a very helpful, Fuzzy. Oh, feeling very emotional on this journey lately. Well, look, I got to be honest with you. This also is something I think has to do with fertility and truly with gynecology in general. A lot of the things that we deal with, we deal with a lot more than the anatomy. We deal a lot more than the physiology and the hormones. We deal with the heart. We deal with how things feel. And it is never too much for you to pick up the phone and talk to us about how you're feeling. And it may be that, the person on the other end is used to hearing someone tell them about, well, I'm feeling bloated, or I'm feeling some pain on my left side, or I'm feeling, something that's physical, something that, we can address. Well, we should do an ultrasound and take a look. Or, well, you know what, let's check your hormone levels. Or, where are you in your cycle? Let me look at what's happening on your stim sheet. But for you to say, gosh, you know what? I'm just feeling so anxious about this process right now. I just hope that you can talk to me about that. That's an okay phone call too. It really is, because we know what this thing feels like, and we'd like to hear from you because that may be something that we can help with. Let's see, A. Clark says, hello, Miami Princess forever. A. Clark says, should a CVS or an amnio be considered on a genetically normal 4AA euploid embryo, or is it not needed since the embryo was tested? Well, it's a loaded question because it depends on who you ask. All right. And the reason is, so you've done PGT testing. They've taken some cells from the portion of the embryo that's going to become the placenta, and they have tested them. So you had a highly graded, a 4AA embryo. That's a beautiful embryo. It's a euploid embryo, meaning it's chromosomally normal. So they say. And that embryo stuck and it started to grow, which means all the more likely that it is probably normal. But can you be sure? Can you be guaranteed? Well, no, you really can't, because again, what they're doing, they're testing from the portion of the embryo that becomes the placenta. So let's say this is your little embryo, right? Let's say that's the embryo. The baby parts are here on the inside. What they're testing from is this part that goes around the outside. It's called the trophectoderm, and that's what becomes the placenta. You can have an abnormal embryo, like the baby part, and still have a normal placenta. So that's the argument for doing an invasive test like CVS, chorionic villi sampling, or an amniocentesis. Now, what are the odds that that's going to be the case? A normal euploid embryo, an embryo that tests euploid on PGT testing, has a very high what's called positive predictive value, meaning to say that if it says it's normal, it's probably normal. Now, your MFM doctor will say, well, you can't be sure. And, until you actually test those chromosomes, that can miss some micro deletions. And there's, some this, that, and the other. And so they'll say, maybe you want to consider doing the testing. And here's my answer to that. I think if you want to be 100% sure, you do a test. But which test do you do? Well, if you are someone who is of advanced maternal age, which means over age 35, you're at an increased risk for having chromosomal issues with your embryo. Now, if you didn't do IVF and you got pregnant on your own, my recommendation is, if you're going to do the invasive test, instead of something like non-invasive prenatal testing, which is a blood test, which is not a perfect test either, I would suggest, and you have a choice, a CVS or an amnio. The CVS, or chorionic villi sampling, is done in usually at about 11 weeks or so, 11 to 12 weeks of pregnancy, right? So it's done early. It's done kind of right at the end of the first trimester. It's done under ultrasound guidance, and it's typically done through the vagina. So if you do that, you get your answer back much earlier, usually by about, within a week or so, you know that your pregnancy is normal. And it's nice to know that in the first trimester because it just gives you that peace of mind before things have gotten far enough that then it may cause you some difficulties. If you wait and you do an amniocentesis, well, that's typically done sort of after, roughly 15, 16 weeks or so. So you don't get your answer back there until, well, 16 or 17 weeks. So it is a little bit later to find out. Now, hopefully you find out everything is completely normal. But if you don't, the sooner you have that information, the better off I think you are. But both of those procedures have risk. And what's the risk? The risk is you can actually lose the pregnancy as a result of those procedures. They quote a CVS test as having a 1 in 100 risk. They quote the amniocentesis as having a 1 in 200 risk. So my feeling is that if you want to do the test and you've done PGTA, well, PGTA, again, it's pretty good. Choose the less risky test, do the amniocentesis at 16 weeks, because in all probability, your result is going to be normal. If you just got pregnant on your own, I certainly recommend the CVS because then you get that information really before you're barely outside of the first trimester. Does that make sense? Would I do an amnio if I were pregnant? And believe me, I feel pregnant right here. But there are a lot of people who will tell you, "Oh gosh, you should," and you'll hear stories. Well, I did the PGT, but then when I did that testing, I found out, You'll hear that. Would I do it? I think for me personally, well, what I would do personally may not be the most important thing, but I'd feel pretty good with your PGT results. And NIPT, non-invasive prenatal testing, gives you some greater confidence that you don't have one of three things, and that's trisomy 13, trisomy 18, or trisomy 21, Down syndrome. And those things, it would be extremely rare to have with a PGT normal embryo. But there are some advantages to doing the invasive testing to look for some things that could have been missed on PGT. Let's see here. We've got Kimberly over here. I've had 7 miscarriages. All ending before seeing a heartbeat. Me and my fiance both have had chromosome tests and everything has been fine. Should I just do IVF? Well, Kimberly, I would tell you there is more to the workup than just the chromosomes. So I would really want to kind of complete that whole thing and want to know make sure there's nothing in your blood that's causing this, that there's nothing in your immune system that's causing this. The advantage for you of doing IVF is that, well, the most common reason that miscarriages occur is because of genetics. It has to do with the chromosomes in the embryo. And when you do IVF, you can select a chromosomally normal embryo. So at least you're taking that genetic part of it off the table. You're at least removing that from the front seat so that at least that will not be the problem. But before rushing into that, I would certainly say, gosh, we want to dot every I and cross every T, because 7 miscarriages is a lot for somebody to have to go through and still, have the strength to want to have a baby. And so I applaud you for that. And do I think you can have a baby? Yes. But I'd want to make doggone sure that we're doing everything we can, not only to get you pregnant, but to keep you pregnant. Vanessa, actually, I'm sorry there. Kim says, I've had 3 children. I had 3 children with a different partner. My tubes were tied in 2016. The tubes reversed in 2021. Since I had my tubes reversed, starting in 2022, I've had 7 miscarriages. Oh, Kim, that's you. You're giving me okay. So Kim is over here on Instagram, but also get a little more information here from the Facebook side. I never make it to even seeing a heartbeat. We've had the chromosomes and the semen analysis, all were fine. Tired of the heartache of recurring loss. I'm scared if I spend the money on IVF, it will still end in miscarriage. So a little bit more information there, but yeah, so there is really a whole other workup we would want to do for recurrent pregnancy loss. So some blood tests looking for different things in the blood, the immune system, in your clotting system, just to make sure that your body is not trying to thwart this process. We also really want to take a look inside your uterus. Let's make sure that there's not a band of scar tissue or a ball of muscle or something on the inside that is impeding these pregnancies from being able to continue to grow. Vanessa asks, do women 35 and older have a hard time getting euploid embryos? So again, a euploid embryo means an embryo that's chromosomally normal. And I would say no, not specifically, but as we mature, more and more of the eggs that are produced will not be chromosomally normal. So it's not that it's necessarily a harder time getting euploid embryos, because you could just as easily, it does have to do with age. The euploidy rate of embryos is going to be higher in women that are under 35. But I'm hesitant to say have a hard time because I think it just depends on how we try to get you to produce your eggs and on the other sorts of things we can do to try to improve on egg quality. And what can we do? Well, there is an evidence-based list of supplements that I will recommend folks be on to try to improve egg quality. That's one very important thing. There is, and what's the most important supplement? CoQ10, I think, is the most important supplement. CoQ10, I think fish oil or omega-3 is very important, and I think alpha lipoic acid. These are all things that your body will use to help your own DNA repair mechanisms try to fix some of that age-damaged DNA. And so I think that's really important there. And I think that, and sometimes there's also a medication that we can use now. Now, people have traditionally used Omnitrope, which is growth hormone, for better egg quality. There is a pill that I'm using now called sirolimus or rapamycin that seems to have a very positive and beneficial effect on egg quality based on some recent evidence. So can women take alpha lipoic acid? Absolutely. It is on the list of supplements for egg quality. It certainly is. Yep, 600 milligrams a day, which is the same dose as men would take to help with sperm. Let's see. What are the chances of a PGT tested normal embryo after transfer to continue to divide and become abnormal? That odds of that are, well, that's a complicated question, because when you have a chromosomally normal embryo, it suggests that all that cell division stuff is going to continue to proceed as normal. Doesn't always, because of some other things. Now, people with euploid embryos can still have miscarriages. And you say, well, how does that happen? Well, we say a good euploid embryo has about a 65 to 70% probability of a pregnancy. It's not 100%. Why not? Well, there can be things going on inside the uterus, but even in the embryo itself, though we know that the chromosomes are normal, we can't say what's happening in those millions of little chemical reactions that are all taking place in any given moment in every little cell in that embryo. Millions of them. And if one of those things goes awry, then that embryo will stop growing. And can part of that stop growing be that the cell division starts to occur incorrectly? Maybe so, but I think of it more as a separate process than becoming abnormal chromosomally. Chromosomes are chromosomes when they go in. Moreover, the embryo itself can just fail because of other issues. Does that make sense? Hope so there. What words of encouragement or advice would you give to someone who's gone through multiple rounds of IVF with no success? I get this often and would love to hear what you would say. First of all, there are People often think of what we do as magic, and there's no magic to it. It's really science, and it is truly heartbreaking when things don't work the way they're supposed to. In fact, I hear almost every day that, gosh, when we're younger, we do everything we can to not get pregnant. That's constant worry is, what if I miss my period? Oh my God, oh no, what happens? Use protection. Oh, get on birth control. Don't get pregnant when you don't want to be pregnant. And then when you want to be pregnant, it doesn't come easily. And people often blame themselves for that. People often blame themselves for choices that they've made earlier in their lives. And as you know, Logan, guilt is a very powerful motivator, and shame is a true thundercloud that hovers over us no matter what we do. And no matter whether those choices were relevant or have anything to do with where we are in our lives right now. So the first thing I would, try to encourage folks is that, this is not because of decisions that you've made before. You weren't ready to be pregnant before. You didn't have the right partner. It would have been potentially a disaster for you to have gotten pregnant with the wrong person and had a baby at the wrong time of your life. So don't fault yourself for not having done this sooner. And that is really a very realistic kind of thing. As it pertains to going through all those cycles of IVF, I would say it's time to get a fresh eye, to get a fresh look at what was done and whether anything could be done different. But I will say that there's also a time to say, you know what, I think IVF is not going to be the solution here, or that using my own egg is just not going to be viable. Now, most of the time when people go through this process, do they have a normal egg in their bodies? Of course they do. I wish there was some way that we could selectively just say, you know what, I want that egg, that one, and that one, because those are the normal ones. You can keep all the rest. Unfortunately, the science, just isn't there at this juncture. And so we deal with getting the abnormal eggs, which don't give us success. At some point, you accept that, well, a donor egg is going to be a much easier solution to having a baby, and every drop of your blood flows through that baby. It's your baby, and we can talk about that more maybe next time. But I think having gone through it enough, it's nice to get a fresh look at what was done for someone who's tried so many times and hasn't been successful. A fresh set of eyes, and then maybe a consideration for, what are our other options here, and what's going to feel best in order to fulfill that dream of building the family. Well, folks, I think, let's see, Mohi says, oh, hello. I'll see if I can get this one in here. Does embryo glue help with embryos? Embryo transfer? My clinic doesn't offer it. Embryo glue is a gimmick. Embryo glue is just what's called hyaluronic acid. It is a brand. It's a brand name. And you think, oh, embryo glue. Well, that's glue that goes on the embryo, and that's what makes the embryo stick. It's just a brand of the media or some of the chemical that's used in the stuff that goes along with the embryo during embryo transfer. Very wisely marketed, I might say. I wish that I had come upon that myself and named that, but it sure makes you think, I've got to have embryo glue, right? It's not bad stuff, but really what it was a great marketing tool. So yes, you are fine because we still use hyaluronic acid with the embryos there. So hi, Macy, nice to see you. Well, folks, it looks like we are going to have to wrap it up tonight because we're back at the top of the hour. I hope you'll be able to join me next week. We are here every Tuesday evening at 5 p.m. Central, which means 6 on the East Coast, 5 o'clock in the, what did I say, 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock Central, 6 on the East Coast, 4 o'clock in the mountains, and 3 o'clock on the West Coast. The fertility business is not the book of your life. It is just a chapter. And what we are here to do is to rewrite that book together. Let's make it a whole new chapter, shall we? Every step forward with love, every step forward with kindness, and every step forward with hope, knowing that tomorrow is a new day and it is full of all new adventures. So until next week, I'm Dr. Randy Fink. Thanks so much for being here. Good night.